What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. The Post WrestleMania 40 SmackDown airs tonight live on Fox, just 22 nights away from Backlash. And I've got the full preview coming up for you. But first, we've got a lot of numbers to go over. I have the full week of ratings in front of me. It was the biggest week of the year in professional wrestling. So how did Raw, SmackDown, NXT, and even AEW do? Let's find out. And let's start with SmackDown. The Mania Go-Home show for the Blue brand pulled its highest number since August of last year, coming in at a 2.6. with an 18% jump from last week and a stunning .77 18-49 demo. That is a 28% increase over last week. WWE would have loved to have had SmackDown pull a 2.728, being the highest rating in the past couple of years, but when you've been averaging 2.4s and 2.5s, a 2.6 is most likely a welcoming sight for the company. They'll take that. They will not look back. SmackDown 2.6 with a .77 demo. Now over to Monday Night Raw. This was the post-Mania Raw, and it pulled a 2.36, which marks the show's highest rating in 4 years. Backing that number up was a .83 in the 18-49 demo. So in comparison, the post-Mania Raw just 2 years ago brought in a 2.1 with a .63 demo, and just last year a 2.26 with a .76. But this year alone, if you just look at the numbers from the 15 Monday Night Raws we've had so far in 2024, you see that Raw was stuck averaging between 1.6 and 1.7. That was their average. To catapult to a 2.36 has to be a sigh of relief for the company, and nearly half of these numbers are without any Monday Night Football competition, by the way. You're stuck between a 1.6 and a 1.7. You don't even have that great excuse that everybody likes to toss out there, Monday Night Football. No, you had no competition. Some weeks you were in the 1.5s. So this is precisely why ratings matter, right? The audience is out there. They just have to care. So with all these excuses, you can throw them to the wayside, right? If they, quote, cut the cord, well, clearly they reattached it for this show. If they usually, quote, only watch highlights the next day, well, clearly they chose to watch the show this week. If they, quote, streaming has trumped cable, so they're all on the streaming services instead of watching cable, well, guess what? They left streaming for that night and turned into the USA Network on Monday night. WrestleMania shouldn't be the only time of the year that there's a buzz for the product, and hopefully that changes going forward. But this is why ratings matter. They tell you that story. All these excuses, and no! If you have the right buzz, if people care to tune in, they will. They're there, man. That was a 2.36. You headed to a 2.4 when you've been averaging 1.6 and 1.7. The people are out there. Make them care. There's a reason people are tuning into women's college basketball in droves. It's not just because they can bet on the games. This one person, Caitlin Clark, ignited the entire country. You just have to give people a reason to care. It's sad that WrestleMania is the one time where all these people want to flock back and go, oh, I got to tune in. I got to see what WWE is doing. And then all of a sudden, most years, it goes right back down. Hopefully this, quote, new era can usher in actual change in terms of caring, being invested, being interested in what's to come. That's what we're hoping for. Because a 2.36, man, you would love to see that bare minimum every single week going forward. Of course, that's wishful thinking. But you would like to see numbers like that. There's no reason when you crack numbers that WWE or pro wrestling should not be pulling in over 2 million on average every show. If you have a primetime slot on cable, every statistic, every measure of numbers will tell you there's no reason pro wrestling is under 2 million. That's huge. But the biggest the biggest number to come out of this show, the most incredible number to come out of Monday's Raw, was the 3 segments with Rock and Cody, which averaged 2.95. With quarter 3 popping a whopping 3.19 with a 1.03 mil demo 18 to 49. What? BC has to repeat it. Q3 on Monday Night's Raw pulled a 3.19 rating with over 1 mil in the 18 to 49 demo. Bro, Rock and Cody popped a 319. That match has to happen. I don't know if it's SummerSlam this year. The commitments for The Rock have piled up. Unfortunately, and Mania just made them pile up even more. So now we don't even know if Mania 41 is going to be in the books for Cody and Rock. But it has to happen. A 3.19. That's how many people were invested. The show itself pulled a 2.3. Rock and Cody by themselves pulled nearly a 3.2. Now over to NXT. NXT pulled 647,000 viewers. The good news, that is 6,000 up from last week's 641,000. The bad news, those are obviously pedestrian numbers. And even more interesting of note is that they brought in main roster talent like Karrion Kross, AOP, Natty. Natty, I believe, even had a match with Roxanne Perez. And they only went up 6,000 viewers from last week. And don't forget, that was the Stand and Deliver post-show this past Tuesday night. So this was their big event, Stand and Deliver. This was their post-show. You got all this main roster talent, and they only pulled a 647,000 viewership. Again, on the bright side, you went up and not down. That's what matters more than anything. You're going up. The bad news is they just find themselves in the same waters with the same boat and they can't find their way to shore. NXT, no matter what they do, they just can't get enough people to care. 647,000 for NXT. And then we go over to AEW Dynamite. Now this is wild. This ain't just interesting. This was wild. A couple days before Dynamite, they announced, I think they did it via storyline, like the Young Bucks were going to air footage of CM Punk and Jack Perry's backstage fight. And then like ESPN or Sports Illustrated asked Tony Khan, is this like real footage? And Tony Khan's like, yeah, this is something that really happened. It affected people and our audience is going to see it. And everyone's like, well, what benefit is that going to do, right? Because it didn't sound like CM Punk was lying. It sounded like they got in a little scuffle. He got a little bit of a choke on, and then Samoa Joe broke it up, and that's that. So unless this footage was really going to tell a whole different story, I don't see the benefit other than popping a rating, which clearly this was the biggest motivator for Tony Khan, right? Because it has to be frustrating. And I mean this sincerely because he has some of the best wrestlers in the world that he just signed. Mercedes Moné, Sasha Banks, Will Ospreay. He even just signed Okada. And somehow the ratings are going backwards, guys. They were at a 752 last week. 750 is their new average, or at least it's becoming their new average. And this dude's throwing a bunch of some of the best wrestlers in the world onto the table on these shows. So of course it's frustrating. So he's like, well, everybody's talking about Cody Rhodes and CM Punk. CM Punk has a broken arm and everybody's talking about Punk. All right, well, I got one last, I can do this. I have the fight. I can pop a rating with CM Punk. And that's why people are like, dude, what are you doing, man? You have all this talent. Like, concentrate on how to get them over, to get your show over. Why even concentrate on Punk? Unless, again, this footage is going to tell a totally different story and make CM Punk look like an idiot. And it didn't. It pretty much was other than like the initial shove, or maybe it was like a little side swipe punch that he threw at Perry. I don't know what that was at the beginning. But then he just kind of got Perry in a little bit of a choke for like 2-3 seconds tops. Samoa Joe comes over, breaks it up like Punk said. And then you see Punk lunge at Tony Khan, who was behind the monitors. But never throwing a punch or anything, just kind of, he was being backed up and he was yelling at Tony Khan. Absolutely. If it was like 2 seconds, if even, and then he's just backed up. So, because you see Tony Khan trying to yell for somebody to break it up, and then Punk kind of turns his direction to Tony Khan and like yells something at Tony Khan. He like goes in that area, yell. But two or three people had him totally. His arms were totally tied back, so he wasn't going to throw any bows at Tony Khan. This was a scuffle that had tempers at a high, and it was broken up. That's all this footage showed. And when it was all said and done, AEW Dynamite pulled an 819,000 viewership, guys. Again, last week was a 752. This week was 819. So the good news is they went up. Steiner math, quick off the top of my dome piece, I guess that would be roughly 67,000 viewership increase. So they did go up 60-some-odd thousand to get back to 800 plus. But they're still way off the mark. Their old average was 950,000, and they were talking about how can we get to 1 million. Now, I mean, have they really moved the goalpost to where 800,000? They're just trying to get that number? I doubt that very much. I think Tony was bare minimum trying to hit that 900 plus. So this was a huge miss in so many ways. Again, ratings-wise, to only go up 67 when you had Mercedes Moné in the attack backstage. You had Ospreay on the show throwing shots at Triple H, talking about how the only reason he's got the position he's in is because he was grinding the boss's daughter. Meanwhile, he's been grinding pro wrestling for years, grinding it out. What would Triple H know about the grind? Something like that. So he's throwing shots over at Triple H. Mercedes Moné is on the show. Okada's on the show. Edge is opening up the show. You got a championship or a lot of stipulation with the championship. Who was it? Dustin Rhodes and Samoa Joe at the end of the show. The Eliminator, or whatever you want to call that main event. So he even wanted a Rhodes in the main event. All of that. And the biggest talking point was the Punk Perry backstage fight, and they only pulled an 819. Again, 0.23 in the demo last week, 0.30 demo this week. So he got the gains. You got to wonder how much of that 67,000 was tuning in just to see the Punk Perry fight, and how many of them are going to stick around. Did they see what they came to see and they liked it and they want to see more AEW because of that fight? I don't know. It's one of those situations where I feel the negatives far outweighed the positives. But Tony Khan went for it, man. He's frustrated. Everything he's trying is not popping a rating. He said, you know what? I got this footage. I can legally use it. He went through the right course of action and just doesn't look like it delivered. And now we're hearing that not only fans, but even his own talent was against airing it. Or at least they weren't happy about it. They didn't think it was the right idea. That's the word going around the campfire. But wild situation, man. I couldn't believe it when I heard they were going to air it. Then I had to question it if it was authentic. And then I had to question what was different than what Punk said. Like, the only person who wins here, I guess, would be CM Punk. Now, before we get into SmackDown, a huge shout out to longtime subscriber Will Smith. Appreciate the banger bomb. Super thanks. Up in the comments on a previous upload. Will Smith, I appreciate you big time, man. Appreciate the support to the channel. Here's to much more amplification to come. Now, moving on. On to the SmackDown Preview. This is SmackDown's Post Mania Show, April 12th, 2024, and it goes live tonight from the Little Caesars Arena in Detroit, Michigan. Tonight's show will not only wrap up loose ends from WrestleMania 40, but also begin the build to Backlash 2024, which airs live from France in just 22 nights. Now, it's early for this recording. WWE has not issued or announced any actual matchups. We expect that to change as the hours go forward. But as of this recording, tonight's show is headlined by an appearance from the new undisputed champion, Cody Rhodes. Roman Reigns is not scheduled for tonight's show or for the foreseeable future. So the only backlash to come out of Mania for Cody would have to be in the form of Solo Sikoa and Jimmy Uso, as they are the only Bloodline members remaining, unless a new member, like a Jacob Fatu, for instance, was to debut tonight. The problem with Solo, Jimmy, and Cody is it's not new. Cody has already whooped Jimmy and Solo many times as appetizers just to get to Roman. Now, after conquering the main course, Cody goes back to the appetizers? Just wouldn't make sense. More importantly, it's just not a fun direction for the talent or the fans. And, not to mention, Solo has lost his last 38 matches in a row. Solo is on a losing streak of 38 consecutive matches. Ever since he annihilated John Cena, he's never won another match. And Jimmy's not much better. Jimmy's last 38 matches, he's only won 4 of them. So much love to Solo, much love to Jimmy, but realistically, they have not been booked to be in there with Cody Rhodes. So we'll see if they have something new for Rhodes tonight, or do they keep him stuck in neutral with the bloodline. Also, new Women's Champion Bayley is advertised for tonight's show. You'd have to believe they're going to extend the Bayley Damage Control feud into Backlash, and this makes total sense. You can do some really good matches between Bayley and Damage Control, even in the form of rematches, which I'm never too high on. But whether it's Bayley and Asuka, Kairi, or even Io again, these are fun rematches, especially with the roles reversed, Bayley as the champion, and now Damage Control has to chase. There's also teases that AJ Styles and LA Knight will be extending their story into Backlash, which I am totally okay with. So we'll see if that remains true between Styles and Knight tonight. We're also expecting to see both Tiffany Stratton, the center of the universe, and Braun Breaker on tonight's show. Both were not a part of WrestleMania Night 1 or 2, but both are going to be major players in the future of this company. The only question is, will Baron Corbin join Breaker? They were recently tag title holders down in NXT. They brought Baron Corbin back to NXT to try to find a character that connects with the crowd. So they linked him up with Braun Breaker, who was down in NXT for an entire year too long. So both, it's like they had no plan. It was such an odd mashup. It worked a little bit towards the tail end, but you gotta believe that Braun Breaker has to be on his own. So if Baron Corbin is going back to the main roster, that's one thing. You can't tie him down like an anchor to Braun Breaker. We'll see what they do with them tonight, because Breaker is supposed to be a part of the show. There's no word on the U.S. Championship, so we don't know. Logan Paul was not advertised last I checked. Randy Orton and Kevin Owens are supposed to be a part of the show, so we'll see if they're just moving on from the U.S. title. Waller, in theory, will have a segment tonight. That is planned for tonight. We don't know if that's a match or just like the Waller effect, maybe like talk show, but they're supposed to have a segment tonight. The new tag team champions, Waller and Theory. And then for some reason, there's a highlight over Jade Cargill, even though she's showing up on Raw having matches. They want to book Jade Cargill like that Goldberg character from the past, and they're just going to have her rack up W. So don't be surprised. They have not officially announced it, but Jade Cargill is supposed to be a part of this show, and there's a highlight over it. So I'm not sure if that's just a backstage segment. You could see Jade Cargill have a quick matchup tonight. And that's what I got for you guys, man. That is the SmackDown preview for 4/12/24, the post WrestleMania 40 SmackDown. We'll see what they actually produce from top to bottom, beginning to end, start to finish. And BC and the unit will be right back here reviewing it all, amplified style. Till next time, and there will be that next time. Top guys, we're out. BC saying check you.